So, hello, comrades. Today we will speak one more time with comrade from USA, Patricia Gorky. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me on again.
And before we started, I wanted to say that last time when we talked, we celebrated the anniversary of the October Revolution. And today also we can celebrate something very important for the international communist movement. A few days ago, we had international strike against Amazon in 26 countries, in Poland, in Cambodia, in Bangladesh, in European Union, but also in USA. In one day, the workers protested against exploitation in Black Friday in Amazon. So this internationalist working fight, where in the time of Marx was only the idea, now is the reality. And like the capitalism is the global system, now the struggle against the bourgeoisie also became global. So I think that it is something that we have to celebrate. And our discussion, we will speak about the American dream, which is not a dream. We will speak about the poverty in the USA. So Patricia, let's start.
Well, thank you, Mikhail. And I think that is a great introduction to this topic of poverty in the US because specifically because when we look at Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, as the bourgeoisie at the top, as the capitalists, as they gain ever more wealth and ever more luxury, there's ever increasing misery for those at the bottom. And that luxury is not possible without this poverty. And I think this is one thing that when we see on TV, we have a particular view of, or at least internationally, the U.S. is very careful about the image that is crafted and that is sent out, so that people don't actually see the fact that for the vast majority of people in the U.S., they are struggling, because the fact is that nearly half of the country lives in poverty. Now, the U.S. has these different statistics that they use, and very specific ones. And they say if you're about 20,000, if you make about 20,000 or so for an individual, then you are no longer poor. If you make above that, if you make 21,000, but this metric is fundamentally flawed, because there is nowhere in the country that you as a single person can afford to even really live on that amount. There are many different factors that go into why are so many people in poverty. There's rising rents. There's student debt. There's medical debt. But the fundamental aspect is that for so many people, poverty is a very big reality. And this, when you look at who this actually affects, and who is who is targeted by this, of its children, elderly, Black and Latino people, and in fact, the largest cohort in poverty are children. 16 million children live in poverty. And children under the age of 5 are the poorest age group. And what happens is in the US as well is these different programs to provide food. It's called SNAP, or you may have heard the term food stamps. These are brought up to get cut time and time again, whether it's a Republican, whether it's a Democrat. It's these social programs that get cut, and children who are affected. And what these figures represent is really a devastating attack on brain development during these crucial preschool years. And so this creates really impossible choices every day for people who are in poverty, where you essentially have to choose between the heating bill and clothing, between school supplies and food, and of course, on top of all of that, rent that is continually rising. And there's so many aspects to go into as well, too, of schools that are underfunded, schools that get closed down, and students get pushed into larger and larger classroom sizes. You have teachers. Another part: teachers pay for their own school supplies. And the money that a school receives depends on how wealthy the neighborhood is. So if you live in a wealthy neighborhood, the school is going to get a lot of money. If you live in a poor neighborhood, the school will get nothing. And so it's a very real issue of where teachers are working second jobs just to be able to afford to live. And of course, there's also there's another important component of this, which is that for Black people and Black families, this is in Boston. There was a study that was done. It showed that the net worth of the median net worth of Black families in Boston is $8. That's not a typo. It's not a mistake. $8. That means half of all Black families in Boston have less than $8, and half have more. This is the lowest out of 5 cities that were reviewed, and in fact, actually nationally, that figure is negative. Of Black families have a negative net worth in the United States. For people from Puerto Rico, for Puerto Ricans, it's $3,000. That's the median net worth. So all of the assets, salary minus the debt. About $3,000. And then for Dominicans, it's $0. Now I want to compare that to white families. The median net worth of a household for white families in Boston is $247,000. So when we look at poverty, we also have to understand not only of the attacks on all of the working class, but particularly the intense attacks on Black, Latino, immigrant families, and how this affects people. I would have paused right there, Mikhail. I wasn't sure, if you have any questions or anything that you wanted to go into as well.
No, I think that you can continue. I make a note. You have a lot of data, so I am only listening. And when you finish, I will ask, because you attacked me about all this data, and now I try to think. But don't worry. It's very, very interesting, and it is something that is very, very important to discussion in Eastern Europe, because the United States is presented like the paradise, and if we in the Poland will work hard, we will be rich and happy like the workers in USA. So I would like to know what is my future. So.
Well, the reality for most US workers is that of perpetual struggle and poverty. There's this guidance that came from some think tank or some institute that you should spend 30% of your income on rent. That, I want to say, that's an absurd number. In the Soviet Union, people paid 3% for housing. And in Romania, when it was socialist, you had a house for free. But here, you are told that you should pay 30% of your income to rent. Rent that is going to a landlord, rent that can increase without any restriction. And there are different. In the U.S., it's a big country. There are 50 states and then a bunch of cities within those, and each of those cities and states have their own laws and have their own systems. And what that means is that in some cities where people have been able to struggle and fight for rent control, like in San Francisco, for example, has one of the most stringent rent control protections that exists, where your rent can only go up about 2% a year, which is still a lot of money. That can come out to hundreds of dollars over a number of years, which for families, is very, very difficult. And of course, there is a huge issue with evictions that continues, and we'll talk about evictions as well, because even in San Francisco, hundreds of thousands of people have been evicted from their homes over the decades to make way for richer people, to make way for new developments that they can sell at exorbitant prices. But I want to highlight that for on the national average, for someone just to be able to, have a 2-bedroom home, which if you have a partner, if you have a child, you want enough space, you would need to earn 23, almost $24 an hour. And for a 1-bedroom, you would need $20 an hour. The federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. That means the legal minimum that you can be paid is $7.25 an hour. There's been a big push over the years for the fight for 15. You may have heard this slogan for a $15 minimum wage. Some cities have adopted this, but here's the other part. In these cities, you need much more than $15. You need much more than $20. In fact, to live in San Francisco, to live in New York, the median income for the median rent that you would pay per month is anywhere from $2,500 to $3,000 for one apartment. I mean, that's just out of reach for so many people, and is a very very big issue. And so what happens is that a lot of people are housing insecure. A lot of people, there's the issue of homelessness, which I'll also get into, but then there's also the issue of where people are crowded into houses together, where you have three families in one apartment, and this is something that doesn't get as much visibility. And so when you are earning either minimum wage or working for at Walmart, for example, they have given out flyers to all of the workers who are there at Walmart, making the company run, earning these billions of dollars for the Waltons. When you sign up, they will give you a sheet on how to file for federal aid for food stamps, meaning that Walmart is essentially subsidized by the government because they refuse to pay their workers a living wage, a livable wage, to the point where even though people are working full time, they're working not just one job, but 2 or 3 jobs, and they are still not able to make ends meet. This is the reality for people. And when we talk about the difficult choices that people make when it comes to how to pay for food, how to pay for housing, for electricity, and others, what we have is that 38 million people live in food insecure households. This means that they essentially don't know where their next meal is going to come from. This means that they don't know what they're going to eat, how they're going to pay for that. And in fact, of 9.4 million adults are classified as living in households with very low food security, and 6.1 million children are living in food insecure households. And so, we all know, and there's this concept of food deserts, of essentially in poor neighborhoods where grocery stores won't open up because, right, society is not organized on the basis of how do we meet the needs of people. Society is organized on what's profitable. And when you see stores like Trader Joe's or Whole Foods or, even some of the big box grocery stores of Kroger and so on, where do they set up shop? They set up shop after analyzing. They make very careful planning, very careful study of the population to see where can we open a store that will bring in the most profit, because that's what they care about. And so what happens is that neighborhoods, particularly Black immigrant neighborhoods, often do not have any grocery stores. This sounds incredible, right? Like, I'm seeing these things and you're like, Patricia, how can there be places that have no grocery stores? But this is the reality for so many people who do not have access to vegetables, fruit, just fresh produce, and of course this impacts children tremendously. It's such an important time for children to be able to get the nutrients that they need. There's a whole another aspect too about school lunch debt. And I don't know if you've heard about this, but there was an article that showed, so Uh, so for students to eat at school, they have to pay. You have to pay, I don't know, a certain amount of money every single day for your student to for your kid to be able to eat at school. And if you don't have any money, they won't feed your kid. They'll put you into debt. And actually, there was. I'm going to share this. Um, I'm going to share. How do we do this? There was a Pennsylvania school. I don't think I can share just yet, but there was a Pennsylvania school that warned parents that they needed to pay their lunch fees, or they were going to send their kids into foster care. Meaning that if you are so poor, if you don't have enough money to pay this school the lunch debt for your child to eat, that school is going to report you to Child Protective Services and have your kid taken away from you into the foster care system, and seized from you, all for the crime of being poor. Because that is fundamentally, you see, no matter in whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's housing, at every step of the way, you are criminalized for being poor, you are penalized for being poor, you are put into conditions that are inhumane and inhabitable. And in fact, in 2018, the UN sent a special rapporteur on extreme poverty and human rights. And this guy, Philip Alston, he went throughout the United States and he took note of the different living conditions of people. He reported about how raw sewage flows from homes through exposed pipes and into open trenches and pits, about how preventable diseases like hookworm and other diseases were prevalent among poor Americans, because there's no infrastructure that's built for them, and because they live in an area where there's no sewer system, or where their houses are not connected to the sewer system. So that means that they have to build what's called a sewage tank, where they're essentially their own miniature sewage system. But these need to be repaired periodically. They need to be cleansed out, and it costs many hundreds or thousands of dollars. People don't have that kind of money, and so what happens is that you end up in these conditions where it is uninhabitable, where people cannot survive. They get continually sick. And this is all over the country. You may have heard as well about Flint, Michigan, which had poisoned water. And not only was there lead in the water, which, by the way, that meant the intentional brain damage, permanent, irreversible brain damage of hundreds of thousands of people and children. That is something that is irreversible. So there was the lead aspect, which is horrendous enough and criminal enough, crime against humanity, of permanently disabling so many people. But then there were also bacteria that was coming into the water that was causing Legionnaire's disease, a very severe and fatal type of illness. And these parasites in the water. It turns out that there are thousands of cities all across the U.S. just like Flint, and these are in the poorest neighborhoods in the United States, where people do not have access to clean drinking water. And I want to just go back really quickly, and I want to come back again to the effects on health. But this photo, by the way, it just looks like maybe a highway, a traffic, or just very heavy traffic. But actually, what this photo was taken from April 2020. This photo was taken in San Antonio, Texas, of people waiting in their cars in line at the food bank. Now, I haven't counted all of the cars that were in these lines, but these are people who are waiting for a box of food. So when we talk about the real and desperate situation for people, it is very real. And in fact, there are a number of programs here in the Bay Area where I live, and where they give out either groceries or things to kind of help people who are in desperate need. The lines go around the block, and I remember growing up. I was born in Romania, but I grew up in the U.S. I remember growing up hearing all these times about waiting in line and about these lines and how that was a sign of something that was very wrong. And there are many issues with that that anti-communist characterization as well there are foreign debt that was causing shortages in the Romanian economy. Here, there is no foreign debt that's causing that's causing a lack of goods. And in fact, what happens is that you have grocery stores. There's plenty of food. You have grocery stores. You have other places that throw out thousands and thousands of pounds of food. I think actually hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And something like 40% of all food that is generated in the US is thrown away. So the issue is not on distribution. The issue is not that the US is a poor country struggling to develop, as Romania was, as the Soviet Union was, as was so many other countries and around the world. The issue is that here we have in the richest society that basic human rights like food, medicine, shelter are only available for profit, only available if you are profitable to the capitalist system, are only there if you are able to produce something that can make the rich even richer. And so I just wanted to highlight and call this part out because this is something you won't see. You won't see displayed, or maybe you'll see occasionally. But the image that the U.S. presents is a land of plenty, a land of opportunity. But what we see instead is that the U.S. is a land of plenty of suffering and plenty of poverty. And in a very, very serious situation. And again, of going back to, and I think you can see just in this home, for example, I want to point out, these are real photos, by the way, all of these are real photos that were taken from in the US. And just to go back a little bit too, here we have this photo, by the way. There are many people who live in areas just like this in what are called mobile homes. And these are homes that are made of a very thin type of material, so they get very easily cold. These are people who are very poor, and having to move from place to place. So I want to highlight these are where working people work, and these are people who are working. These are people who work every day of their lives, who have no paid time off. Because paid time off is not a right. That means if you're sick, or if you just want to take a break, or if your parents pass away, you have no right to take time off from work, or you risk getting fired. But I wanted to highlight again of these photos because they really tell a story. And here I want to highlight there is no paved sidewalk. And this is something that's very conspicuous in rich parts of cities. The sidewalks are paved. They're there, and the houses are painted. They're just fine. But in many parts of the U.S., you have entire neighborhoods and sometimes entire cities that either have very poor infrastructure or none at all. Some places don't even have sidewalks, so you can't actually safely walk from place to place. So these are some of the aspects. Now, I had talked as well about drinking water and the impacts on health. And one thing I want to bring up as well is the impact on health, which is of medical debt, because more than half, the vast majority of bankruptcies, people go bankrupt because of medical debt. That means that they go into a hospital and they come out with a bill that can be $50,000, $80,000, $100,000, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so what happens? What are the effects of this? This means that people don't go to the doctor when they feel sick. They don't go to the emergency room. If you were to be walking down the street and fall and break your leg, or maybe even just have just like a bad injury, if you were to call an ambulance to come and take you, that could cost anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 if you don't have health insurance. And by the way, and health insurance is very expensive. You can only, thanks to the Affordable Care Act, which, by the way, initially forced everyone to get private healthcare. There's no universal healthcare plan. But it used to be the case that health insurance companies could deny you if you had what was called a pre-existing condition. So that means that if you had cancer and if you needed treatment and you want to sign up for health insurance, they would say, well, you already had cancer before, so we are not going to cover any of your cancer treatment, because the health insurance companies profit from denying coverage. That is literally how they exist, how they make money. They take in payments from people, from all these different people, and then they look to cut as much of the payouts as possible. And so what happens is that a lot of people don't have health insurance. Either you get it through your employer if you're lucky enough to have an employer, but even when you have health insurance, even through an employer paid plan, it can be the case that you're still stuck with huge bills if the insurance company decides that they don't want to pay. And so this creates this horrific situation where people just do not get health care and they avoid going to the doctor. And in fact, I can say personally, I remember of many years ago, I actually worked in a coffee shop, and my monthly income of what I brought in was about $600. And I had health conditions. I needed to go to the doctor. Everyone needs to go to the doctor. That's the thing. Everyone needs healthcare. There's no way around this. And I looked into getting health insurance because I wanted to make sure that I would be covered. And the cheapest health insurance that I could find was $700 a month. So even if I had put all of my monthly income to health insurance, I still wouldn't have been able to afford it. And so it's a very serious situation. Of course, tying in reproductive rights and access to reproductive health care for women, especially, is a huge issue, because if you don't have health care, if you can't access birth control, if you're unable to access an abortion, get access to an abortion, there are many women who end up in these positions where they're forced essentially to carry their pregnancies to term and become mothers when they're also not financially able to. So it's a very, health affects every aspect and every facet of life. But the bankruptcies are, I think this is such a big indication of the situation. And in fact, there's also, when we look at the financial health of people, one thing that was found was that most people cannot afford a $500 bill. So that means that if your car tire goes flat, if you get into an accident, or if something happens where you just need, a few $100s to cover that emergency, the vast majority of working people cannot afford that. Meaning they're living paycheck to paycheck and essentially on a knife's edge. And missing that one payment can essentially mean the difference between having a home and being forced into homelessness. Which brings to the next topic about evictions, which is a very real issue that is affecting so many people. And eviction is where you're thrown out of your home. There's no other way to put it. A cop will come, the sheriff comes with guns loaded, even tanks sometimes. They brought in, there were two homeless mothers here in the Bay Area. This was a couple years ago, who they needed a house. And there are, by the way, there are millions of empty homes. There are millions of empty homes, and hundreds of thousands of homeless people. And so the issue is, again, the issue is not of a lack of housing. The issue is not that we don't have enough houses. The issue is that houses are only available for people. The houses are only available if the banks can profit from people living in them. And so these two women, they took over one of these houses over in Oakland, just across the bay from here, and they occupied the houses, and they made this political stand saying, we need houses. Housing is a human right. No child should be unhoused. No child should be without a house. No person should be without a house. And what happens, and there was a big, demonstration and community members that came and organized with them, and the sheriffs actually came to evict them. The sheriffs came with their, like, almost tank-like vehicles, because the police here, they get all of this military gear from the military. And so we then see actual tanks that are used in warfare, abroad, brought here for the warfare against the people. And it really highlighted, not only the crisis of housing, but also of police violence, which ties into so much. But for evictions, I want to highlight, because I found this so fascinating, of the Princeton Eviction Lab. They are running this eviction survey, and where they do studies on evictions, and more than 500,000 people, not even 500,000 people, 500,000 families have been evicted since the beginning of the pandemic. But one thing you'll note is that this is only 6 states. There are 44 more states in the US. So out of only 6 states, and a handful of cities, the full picture of evictions is nowhere tracked, because the federal government does not track evictions. There is no national data on evictions, because they hide these numbers. Similarly to how they hide numbers around poverty, similarly to how they hide numbers around unemployment, to artificially reduce the levels, and also similarly to how the government hides data on police killings. Police are not obligated to record how many people they kill each year. And so, as with all of these statistics, in how the capitalist government really works to hide away its crimes, we also have a lack of information and lack of visibility and censorship when it comes to evictions, and when it comes to how are people being affected. And one story, there are so many stories like this, of one woman who was on the process of being evicted. She had actually applied for rental assistance, but her application was rejected because she accidentally marked no on a form when she was asked about whether she had been impacted by the pandemic. And that one check mark, this shows just a little bit of the bureaucracy, the bureaucratic stranglehold that exists, where they will look for any tiny detail to destroy your life, to throw you out, to make way for someone who is profitable. And this story, I'm very sad to say, is something that is so common, of elderly people with young families, of people, in all different stages of their lives, are forced to either go sleep in maybe go move into a family's house or a friend's house if they're lucky, or in their cars. There are many people who live in their cars. And then, of course, for the people who have neither of these, they are forced to sleep on the streets, completely exposed to the elements, completely exposed to the violence of the streets, and again, with nowhere to go for them. And you know, where I live in San Francisco, there's a street, there's a very long street that's towards the outskirts, and every day when I'm heading home, I pass by this street, and all along the street are parked RV after RV. You know, like these vehicles that you see of like going camping or something like this, and some like small, some larger. But these are not people who are vacationing. These are people who do not have a stable house. And in fact, because they have this RV, they're actually some of the people who are homeless who are much more well off because they have a place where they can actually, a safe place where they can sleep. But it's indicative of there are so many people who are completely struggling. And again, and this is all by design. Because another aspect to this is that with the eviction crisis that is not going away, and with the complete inaction of the government, and carelessness to the plight of so many people, pardon me, is that families, there are 11 million families facing eviction. Like, this is a horrific number. There's no other way to put this. You know, in the organization that I'm in the Party for Socialism and Liberation, we organize on these bases. We organize on the basis of fighting for higher wages, of fighting for healthcare, of fighting against these evictions, against the eviction crisis, but also pointing and bringing people to the struggle for socialism. Because fundamentally, as long as we live in the system where our core rights are dependent on generating a profit, this will continue. This will continue. And in fact, it will only continue to get worse because we can see what's ahead. We don't need a magic ball to understand that with the climate crisis, with the economic crisis, these convergences are creating these situations where we need to have a plan. We need to have a plan for people. And for the United States, their plan is, we see their plan. Their plan is to let as many people die from COVID to avoid them having to spend on actually addressing the situation. Their plan is to allow as many people to be evicted and thrown out onto the streets, to criminalize those in poverty, and continue this process. So this the eviction crisis, again, is a very serious crisis. And I want to also highlight of when you're evicted and what effect this has on you. So I don't know if you had heard, but I remember seeing, this was like a while ago, of this anti-China hysteria. And they were saying that in China, there's a social number that gets assigned to you. And using that of highlighting, you know, some racist rhetoric, which is just false and just building into this demonization. But what I find so interesting, in the US, there is a social score that is assigned to you by a private company. It's called your credit score. And if you're evicted, that goes on your credit score. It's your financial history. If you're evicted, it goes on your credit score. Every single loan you take out goes on your credit score. Your credit score is judged on how much money you have and also how much you don't have. It's judged on how much debt you have. What is your oldest credit card? And it's something that is so, this affects every part of your life, because in order to rent a house, you need a good credit score. In order to get a job, even in some places, this part is crazy, but you need a good credit score in order to get a job. Meaning, if you want to improve your credit score and you're looking for a job, you're trying to get a job, it sometimes depends on if you are already in a good position or if you're already wealthy enough. It affects so many other things of getting, if you're looking to buy a house, whether or not you can get a mortgage or get a loan, it depends on that credit score. And so this, one number that's generated by these private companies dictates all of these different aspects of your life. And by the way, if you're evicted, you will have a very hard time finding another place to rent, much less, thinking of purchasing a house. It's essentially a permanent black mark that goes onto your record. And of course, for so many people, once they're evicted, they fall into homelessness. And it's a very it's hard to understate of just how difficult this situation is for people. There are more than 500,000 people who are homeless, and there are 7 million empty homes. But homelessness is, there are a number of factors that go into this. There are many different aspects to this. But one part that doesn't get covered is that the average age, it affects children the most. Homelessness affects children the most. And this statistic, that the average age of the homeless person is 9 years old. 9 years old. It's such a shocking and horrific number. But again, I talked about people who are sleeping in RVs, people who are sleeping in cars. There's also people who are renting out garages. Like, these are not homes. These are not actual homes, but these are the situations that people are forced into while they are working full time, while they are working multiple jobs, in order to just get by. And in fact, of a new representative who was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, Cori Bush, she had previously been homeless, and slept in a car with her 2 children. And I want to say, this is not uncommon. This is actually something that happens quite a bit, and is a very very serious issue. And of course, people say well, why don't you just go into a shelter? Why don't you just, do this, get a job? Like, all these crazy anti-worker statements and bigoted statements that are put out. But the shelters are actually very difficult to get into. And in fact, they can be dangerous for women and families. Sometimes they're often of very poor quality. They can have bugs, like bed bugs, or cockroaches. Sometimes they don't have heat. And some are also run by churches. So there are actually a number, like in many areas, the only shelters there are religious. So that means that if you want to have a warm place to sleep, you will need to go to their church service. I mean, it's so twisted. It's just a very twisted reality that so many people are forced into and continually face. And I want to highlight too, I've talked about how many homeless people work. And in fact, a very large number of homeless people actually work full time. Like, they have full-time jobs. They go to work. And so it's actually something between 10% of people who are homeless are employed full time, meaning that they go every day to work. They do that work, but unlike their other coworkers, they don't have a home where to go back to at the end of the day. There's also college students. So not only in college, but also in high school and younger, of students who are affected by homelessness. And you can imagine, like, how can you study if you're worried about where you're going to sleep, what you're going to eat? How can you think about school? How can you learn about anything when you didn't even sleep last night, when you were forced to stay on the cold pavement? These are the realities for people. And also, they're also educated. There are many people who either have college degrees, even master's degrees, who end up homeless. And these effects. So when we talk about the poverty and the health of how it's affected people of access, no access to running water, to fresh food and vegetables, this has an effect on life expectancy as well, to where the average life expectancy for a homeless man is 50 years old. It's incredible. I mean, it's a horrific statistic. And in fact, actually, life expectancy in the US has started declining. This is the first time in maybe 100 years that this trend has started to decline. But it used to be the case that, you know, the mark of a good society is that you increase services for people, you make sure that they live longer. But what we're seeing is that under capitalism in the US, in the richest country that has ever existed in the history of Earth, what we see is that in this country with so much wealth, that life expectancy for people is declining. And this is not just around, this is not just for people who are homeless, but also for Native Americans in particular. So on Pine Ridge, the Pine Ridge Native American Reservation, life expectancy is the second lowest in the Western Hemisphere. 80% of people are unemployed. And I want to read, so this was established in 1889 as a camp for indigenous prisoners of war, as white colonists were moving through westward, and it's home to the Oglala Lakota, which is a tribe that's part of the Sioux people. And I just want to highlight just some of the realities for people on Pine Ridge. They use car batteries and generators for a few hours of electricity a day. And they heat up water in a 5-gallon bucket of water on a wood stove to bathe and wash clothes a few times a week. That is in the U.S. That is on a Native American reservation, and this is the reality. You know, it's among the most impoverished of these reservations, with 80% unemployment. The median income is $4,000 a year. The net worth, you know, no clue, probably negative as well. But $4,000 a year, that's half of people make less than that per year. It's incredible. And what I want to go into, and I think why this ties into so many other aspects, but which is the case of political prisoners in the United States. Because what happens to people when they take a stand, and of course it's important to fight, it's important to take a stand. Leonard Peltier is a Native leader who's wrongfully convicted for a shootout out of Oglala, and who has been targeted by the U.S. And what happened was that in Pine Ridge, there were these violent paramilitary groups that were backed by the U.S. government who were attacking people. And 64 people, by the way, including women and children, were killed by these paramilitaries, and because they had opposed the corrupt and U.S.-aligned tribal chairman at the time. And so members of the American Indian movement that included Leonard Peltier were asked by the Lakota Nation for protection. Then FBI agents invaded the farm, and then there was a shootout that resulted in the death of some FBI agents. And then Leonard Peltier was wrongfully charged, was convicted on false testimony. And so, and of course, there's a big campaign for his freedom, and we continue to fight for his freedom. He is someone who needs to come home, who needs to be free. And there are so many other political prisoners as well. Mumia Abu-Jamal, Rochelle McGee, and I wanted to close on this aspect, on the topic of the struggle, to really highlight that the U.S. puts an image of itself as a land of plenty, as a land of riches. But what it is, in fact, is that it is a land of war on working people. And not only does that war spread to people all abroad, but here in those cities, here in the US too, because the reality is, for most people, they are struggling just to survive. And the only hope and the only possibility for a way forward out of this is through struggle. is through coming together, taking a stand, and just as with the uprising against racism last year, of where tens of millions of people have came out into the street, protesting of racist police brutality that predominantly targets Black, Latino communities, poor communities as well. And that fundamentally, and I bring up all these different areas because these struggles are all connected. These struggles are all connected of our oppressors are the same, of it's capitalism that's oppressing us and why we need to fight for a socialist future.
Wow, it was amazing. So, did you watch the series Squid Game?
I have not seen Squid Game, but I've heard a lot about
No.
it.
So this series is it started because one of the guy, his mother is ill, and she is in hospital, and in hospital they inform him that she is very ill, if and maybe they need to cut her leg if she have no medicaments or something like this. So he starting to think how to find money to not cut leg of his mother. But his mother decided to go out from hospital, so I think that he died, or she died, or no. But it's showing the reality of the South Korean capitalism, that the guy decided to participate in the game where most of these people who participate in this game, they will die, because of the reality what is the private healthcare system, and that you have to choose you how get money, or if you don't have money, somebody from your family will die, your children, your mother, and this reality is for me it is something very very important, because the perspective of people who lived in the ex-socialist bloc is different than the USA. I suppose that the most of this problem which you said today existed in the USA from beginning of the capitalism in USA. From Poland perspective, is something different. That most of this problem, like the question of the houses, question of the hospitals, it didn't exist. It was free. It was free for every citizens of Poland. If you are born in Poland, if you work in Poland, the state give you house, and if you are ill, you go to the hospital. And it is not important you have something very very quickly to recover, or very very complicated operation. The state will make all things to make that you don't have to think about this. They will make like Cuba today, that they manage this problem not only for the citizens of Cuba, but also for a lot of people, poor people in the third world countries in the Latin America. And this situation that one day all these things was destroyed, and destroyed also with the help of the so-called leftists from Western countries, who fight it against the Soviet dictatorship, against this I don't know, Stalinism and stuff like this. And for me it is very problem that all the time they are the people in Western countries, after 30 years of the counter-revolution, after all this catastrophe which is in the eastern countries like Russia, where after the counter-revolution there are millions people who died. The demography of Russia, demography of Ukraine, demography of Romania, Bulgaria, and other. It is all these things shown that the counter-revolution was the humanitarian catastrophe. Uh, and they don't care about this, and they all the time they support the counter-revolution which taken place in the past. and all the time they support the colored revolution, to organize this colored revolution in Cuba, in China, in North Korea, and it's something which shocked me. But this number which you said about in the beginning, you said that for renting apartment you need to have 30% of your money. In Warsaw, I am from Warsaw, and I am in immigration, but my city where I was born and I lived most of my life, it's Warsaw. So if you want to rent a house of with 2 bedrooms in Warsaw, it's minimum 600 or 700 euros. 600 euros. And if you want to find work in Warsaw, they will pay you 500 euros. So I don't know how it is possible that 500 euros, and to live you have so it is why the Polish people lived in these houses which are very, very crowded. There are 4 people, 5 people, 7, 8, and they try to divide these houses to many many small apartments where you have only bed. And
yeah, I'm glad when you mentioned about these the differences and what socialism meant for these countries, for Romania, for Poland, for Bulgaria, for the Soviet Union. Of it was a fundamentally different society. It was a society that does not, a system that does not exist today, where you're talking about of where, how could it be that the housing would be more than what you would make? That did not exist previously under socialism. And capitalism, of as it's been brought out, I mean, it has completely devastated these countries in so many ways. You talked about the demographics as well, of that people are leaving. And in Romania, for example, of 1/5 of the entire working population of Romania, working age Romanians, live outside of the country, meaning they've left. There's a shortage of doctors. There's a 30% shortage of doctors. 30% of doctors that should exist in Romania are not there because people they go through the medical system, they get educated, become doctors in Romania, and then leave. And people leave for many reasons, but fundamentally of this is capitalism, and the capitalism that's presented on TV of the U.S. as being, I don't even know, Dallas or these other shows, like showing the lives of the rich, of the famous. They don't show the lives of the workers. They don't show the lives of working people, of Black people, of Latino people, of those who are undocumented, and what people have to not have to, but what people suffer and are made to put through. And I want to highlight too, if you're undocumented, the statistics that I put out, it's very hard to find statistics on undocumented people because they're not shown. But I can say from experience of a family that I know of, they were undocumented, and actually, it was actually the case of 2 sisters, right? Of previously, so the U.S. for a very short period of time had a policy of accepting political asylum from the socialist bloc. Basically, if you came over to the U.S., you could say, I claim political asylum, I'm a political refugee, regardless of the fact that it was nonsense. It was really a way to entice people out of the socialist countries, to bribe them to come over. And it was really an anti-communist law, an anti-communist tool that was used against these socialist countries. And so a number of Romanians were able to go and claim asylum, even though they were not actually being persecuted. One sister, and whether she came through this particular situation or another fact, I think is different. But the U.S. had a number of ways to entice people to come over, including bringing over people who are skilled, who are educated. But she came over with her family. Her kids were born in the U.S., and they've essentially assimilated into the white working class. And they don't really have not much roots back to their home and to their family. And whereas her sister, she grew up, lived her life in Romania, had her family there, and you can just see just the difference of where she and her family were forced. They went to Spain at first, and then other parts, and then also ended up in a situation without documents, and of just the lack of opportunity of what it means. What it means to be undocumented in the U.S. is that you and your entire family can be exploited by working under one contract, and you're paid one salary for 4 people. It's 4 people doing the job, paid the salary of one. It means you are not able to get a driver's license in some areas. It means that because they will ask for your papers, it means that you're not able to get a cell phone, to get a bank account. And yet, for the 12 million people, and people come for a variety of reasons across Latin and Central and Latin America, people are fleeing U.S.-backed violence, the U.S.-backed coups in Honduras, all over the continents. People are coming into the U.S. looking desperate for work, and they are the ones who are working. And actually, I want to highlight. There's another photo that I just want to share that also highlights of what is the situation. What is the situation for the undocumented people, and of how the conditions in which they're working, and what happens is that even in times, so you may have seen that there were these big fires that happened, or even floods. These are undocumented people who are working as the world is burning around them. They're picking cabbages by the light of their cell phones. This is what it means to be undocumented in the US. This is the level of exploitation, and there's so many other aspects of undocumented people, again, of very high numbers of poverty. Because you can imagine they're doing the hardest work for the least amount of pay. They work in the slaughterhouses, and of where these slaughterhouses, they run on these on these like conveyor belts. Everything's around the conveyor belt, and so they move fast, very fast. Everything is timed, and they're continually trying to move things as fast as possible, but they have knives. And they're killing animals, slaughtering animals is work that needs to be done. But the capitalists and the owners of these factories do as much as they can to force people to work so much more quickly in such dangerous conditions that accidents are very common, and it's a very perilous and dangerous job. And so I wanted to highlight this aspect as well, because this doesn't get shown on TV. This doesn't get shown to people who are looking to come to the U.S. And that it's a very big. This is the reality for working people. And I want to highlight too, these are people who pay taxes. In the U.S., there's this big discussion about paying, if you're a taxpayer this, taxpayer that. There's a lot to be said about how baloney that is, of every person has worth regardless of taxes. But one thing to highlight is that these people are paying taxes into a system that they will never extract benefits from. They will never get Social Security, until they are given a pathway to citizenship, because there is no pathway to citizenship. There is no legal way. There is no possible way. It's that the U.S. has allowed for essentially the creation of a subclass of workers to do the most demanding, grueling, difficult work that is possible for the least amount of pay.
I think that we have technical problems. We'll wait for the Patricia. Oh. Oh, you come back.
I,
Uh,
I meant to stop the share and I accidentally left. But
okay.
what I wanted to highlight that as well for undocumented people, it's even more difficult. It's even more difficult to come.
Okay, I will read the comment from the chat. First is the question from the comrade from Russia, effect regulacji. How strong is the left movement in the USA? And there is also the comment, milling we. All this data should be printed as flyers to be distributed to every family in the USA. Best yet, a relevant comparison chart between IG China and US should be made available to every American. Do you want to ask how strong is left in USA?
Yeah, well, I want to highlight just first about China really quickly. I think that's a great comparison to bring up. Of here we see a country that has eliminated extreme poverty, right? Like what an amazing achievement. Of here you have a country that's largely agrarian, and that has over over the decades of transformed into really a society of the future. There's no other way to put it. I have a number of friends who either live in China or go and visit quite frequently, and that's one thing that they talk about how futuristic it is. And I say futuristic, but it's not really. It's only in the U.S. There's this. I don't know if people have seen. There is a comparison that's shown between like the New York City subway and even actually the Moscow subway. I will say the subway in Romania is beautiful, but when you look at how these subways are compared to subways around the world, and of just like the state of dishevelment that it is. And here I'm going to highlight. Okay, I'm not going to leave the stream this time, but I'm going to highlight and share my screen for one of the comparisons of the subway. And let me pull this up just one moment. And this is showing, and I guess for those in Russia, this will be very familiar to you. But I do want to highlight this is actually a subway in New York, and this is how a lot of the subways look. You'll see rats running around. You'll see that in SF too. I mean, they're really gross, and so I would really love. I can't wait for the day when I can see and go through this subway. But when you look at China and the different amazing the high speed rail that they're able to connect the entire country. I mean, it just shows of a completely different way of organizing society. And I want to say about the left and the movement for socialism and building the struggle of and also of like distributing, like putting these flyers out in front of people. For many people, they know this because they live this. This is their lived experience. And in fact, of the organization that I'm in, Party for Socialism and Liberation, we ran a candidate for mayor of New York, Kathy Rojas, on a platform of workers' rights, on a platform of accessible subways and public transportation, of education, of healthcare, and this was it's a very big effort. We go out, we talk to people, we explain the situation, because here's the thing of we don't have the millions of dollars that the bourgeoisie has, right? Like the owners of capital, they have access to all these like billboards that have the signs, they have access to TV ads that can get sent out to all these different people. What we have is our work. We have our members, we have our voices, we have the ability, to go around and organize and mobilize. And so it's a big struggle to reach people and to connect these issues. And for so many people are really just struggling to get through the day. and struggling to to make rent for the end of the month. And so it's a very big it's a very big challenge of reaching people. But I want to highlight again about Kathy Rojas and her campaign. This campaign as a socialist, uh, Kathy received 25,000 votes in New York City for this mayoral election. And New York it's a big place, 8 million or so people, but 25,000 people is a lot. It's a lot of people who made the conscious decision of saying, yes, we want socialism. We want a socialist world, a socialist future. And so that's really the big challenge of reaching people, of explaining the situation, of breaking things down and breaking down, like the liberal narratives that are put forward, and showing that actually this is something that affects our entire class, of we are one united working class, and why we have to fight against all the divisions of racism, sexism, anti-LGBTQ bigotry, why we have to fight these divisions that divide the working class and build on a basis of unity, because our struggles are connected.
I want to make a comment to these numbers that average homeless, life expectancy homeless person is the 50 years. And in the last presidential election, there was two candidates. One Trump, I think he was 74, Biden 78, and all these political elites of USA, they are very, very old. And the comparison with the poor person which died before 15 when they have 15, so it shocked me. But in Warsaw we have a very similar situation. If one time you will came to Warsaw, and we have the right bank of the Warsaw, its name is Praga. It is a very, very poor place. And in the south of Warsaw, we have a new city which is named Wilanów. It is the suburb for the rich person. These elites of the New Poland. It is the President Kwaśniewski who lived there, and he organized to make buildings there, and many rich person there. And a few 1 year or 2 years ago, the president of Warsaw make a statistic to organize, I don't know, the question of the healthcare or something. It was normal statistic to know how many, what is the life expectancy in the Warsaw. And in this Praga, the difference between Praga and Wilanów, it is 70 years. 17 years. So the average people in Praga lived 17 years less than the people in Wilanów. So we from the, and also I want to comment, because you said something about the work in the slaughterhouse. Polish people know very well this job, because most of the Polish people who emigrate, who try to find a job in the Western countries of European Union, they can choose construction. So when I emigrated, I worked with asbest. I don't know, you know what is asbest?
Yeah, the poisonous substance.
Yes, it provokes cancer. So it was the possibility for me to go from Poland, and I worked in this in 6 months in France. And but so it is construction, or truck drivers, or slaughterhouse, or stuff like this. But a lot of you have a lot of job announced in Poland. There is a job in the slaughterhouse in Germany. There is a job in the slaughterhouse in France or Netherlands, or stuff like this. And also I want to say something about this. I don't know if you said this. You said about distribution, that I am working in the it is a little different subject, but it shows how the capitalist system is stupid. I am working in the frozen storehouse now, and I unload the trucks, and I control the merchandise which came. And we are obliged by our managers to find the cartons, the boxes which are destroyed. So if we take a pallet, and in the pallet we have, I don't know, 64 cartons, sometimes I have to check that this carton is destroyed. If I unload all the truck, and I don't make any card box which is destroyed, they said that my work is not good, that I am not verify this pallet. So sometimes for don't have problems, we need to take this pallet, and we destroy one box or something, and after it go to the trash, and they destroy this food. But if we don't do this, they said that we don't control we don't control this merchandise. And I see how it's work, how they destroy this food, because every day all these cartons which are destroyed in the time of the unloading, loading, and in any process of this logistic, all the time there's something which is broken, and all these things they make to the trash and destroy this. And in the time when I am living in the suburb of Paris. In suburb of Paris, you can find thousands of people who live in this condition like this. And in the center of Paris, there is a lot of the cafeteria where it's very, very expensive. And few meters from you, there are homeless people who sleep, who I don't know. And it's something which not shocked you. In Poland before, and I think then all the socialist bloc, homelessness was something which, if somebody is in the street and he sleep in the street, people will be shocked, and they will help him, because it is something unusual. In Paris, the homeless people are everywhere, and nobody care about this, because it is something normal in Paris, that in Paris you have Tour Eiffel and you have homeless people, and you don't care.
It's a very similar situation in the U.S. And I'll say, for a note on the discarded food of I mentioned of 40% of all food in the U.S. that's created is thrown away. But last year, actually, sorry, apologies, this year, there was a case where this grocery store went out of power in Portland. And so and this was during the winter, so it was very cold. They threw out thousands of items that for legal reasons, regulatory reasons, whatever, they threw it out because they could no longer sell it. They put it in their dumpster. Now, this would be like a carton of orange juice that they put in a dumpster, still there in the carton. And people came to go take this food because it was thrown away. Like, it's just gonna rot. This is something that could help people. Police went to the dumpster and they guarded the dumpster against the people, from the people. So the police were there to make sure that people did not get that food. And on
we make article about this in our site.
Really?
Yes, it's not me, but I maybe it was because my cameras also, they watch the news from your seat, and maybe they take this news from you. But I know that it was written in our seat a few months ago about this.
I mean, and it's a very, something that really exposes, right, of just one part of how horrendous of capitalism is, for just like regular human relations. Like, how could you walk by someone, see that they're hungry, and not want to help? And yet, just as you're saying, on the streets of Paris, of people in all sorts of destitution and misery, of so the same in San Francisco, of every single day, I see people going through the trash cans looking for food. And that's not an exaggeration. They're looking for something to eat. I don't know if you remember, of like a couple years ago, of when the U.S. had initiated and was really promoting this coup against the government of Venezuela. They used this fake video of showing people. It was clearly staged, but showing people pulling out things from a trash can. And they said, look, people are eating from the trash. And never mind that the video was later shown to be false, and people were saying, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? As it was happening, but so they use the issue of, look at these people in desperation, and using that as a justification for war, for military invasion, for the overthrow of a sovereign government. Meanwhile, look at what's happening in the US. Look at what's happening in France, in all the centers of the imperialist countries, of where people every single day are pushed to the edges of society, are forced to find any possible way to survive. And in fact, of a lot of elderly people too. And this part is so tragic. They will go through the trash cans and pull out recycling materials. And these are like elderly ladies. You will see them with these very large, like bigger than they are, very large bags full of recycled cans. And these people are so poor that they will walk 2-3 miles to the recycling center, where they'll get about 5 cents, 5 cents per can, to recycle, and maybe, I don't know, get like $50 for like 3 or 4 days of work. So it's very grueling work. It's very grueling and horrible situation that people are forced into.
Okay, it's the very big subject. I'm waiting to the moment that I will make a presentation about this with some of Polish idiots who comment with which I discuss very often in Poland. Because you gave us ammunition, a lot of ammunition, because United States is not as one of the another capitalist country in Poland, and but also I think that in Romania also the United States, it is something like metaphysical country, the kind of religion that we in Poland we know new the what's happened in United States than in the neighbors countries. We don't know what's happened in Czech Republic, in Slovakia. We know what's happened in Belarus, because all the time we are bombarded by the propaganda against the Belarus. But the Polish people don't know what's happened in Germany and other. But everybody know what's happened in the United States, because if you watch the television in Poland, we have the free market. So free market, it is the choice, but we choose between the series of he came from USA, and another series from USA, and another series from USA. All the time, this is the production from the USA. And if we have the Polish politicians, we have different party in Poland, but we don't have discussion about the political about the global politic. All the parties are united that we have to be a member of the NATO. We have support the United States every time, everywhere. If United States wants the Poland sends to troops to Iraq, to Afghanistan, and many other places, without any discussion, we will send. We are always ready to help the United States. So there are also the people in Poland who want to be to make a referendum in Poland to be a part of the United States. This is the program of the political party. We want to be a member of the United States, like a 52nd, or I don't know. So United States is something which in the time of for the solidarity, this counter-revolutionary movement which existed in Poland, the first in this time when the Reagan then destroyed the trade unions in USA, he make a struggle against the trade unions in the airports in United States. He was the closest friends of the trade union in Poland. And Wałęsa, when he became president, first thing which he make, go to Washington and speak in United States. Yes, I am here. And in Warsaw, we have the monument of Reagan. We have the monuments of Washington, a monument of Wilson. So in one place, we have all the time this American propaganda. Because if you try to speak about somebody in Poland, what's happened in United States, they said, United States, yeah, I know this country. I watched I don't know, there was this series, Desperate Housewives or something like this, and everybody is rich, everybody is happy, everybody is young and pretty, and but this reality which you showed me, there is the comment that New York City subway station looks like a place from a horror movie. And it's true that it's something totally different, that you show the different United States, but it's true. And I'm very, very grateful to you for this presentation, because it's very, very important to show, because you make this job like the Engels make a job in the when he wrote about the condition of the working class in England, in the time when the England was a center of the global capitalism. He made this job, and you presented the situation of the working class in the USA, which living in the cars, we are evicted, homeless, living expectancy of living is 50 years. It's very, very important to destroy this myth, because without destroying the myth, without destroying the bourgeoisie ideology, the unification of the workers and struggle for the another society is impossible. So first we have to fight with all this very, very powerful propaganda. In Poland, the most important commercial station is TVN. TVN is belonging to American Discovery, and they don't have problem with lying every day, every hour. They said that the Auschwitz was liberated by the United States and stuff like this. That it's not complicated to verify, but not problem. So thank you, Patricia, for all this presentation. In the description, I give the links for the Liberation School YouTube channel, your YouTube city internet, and it's very, very good job, especially the reading capital with cameras.
No, thank you. And Jan, thank you so much for this opportunity. I do want to say of a couple things of, of course, I can only hope to emulate Engels to the best extent that I can. But all of our work is really, when we look at those that came before. And the socialist experiments that came before. These are real and concrete tasks that we can point to. And one of the things, of why Marxism is so relevant, is still relevant today, is that it is a weapon of the working class. This is the scientific tool that we can use to expose the conditions of society, to cut through the bourgeois lies, to cut through these myths. This is why it's so important, of channels like yours, Mikhail, and in the U.S. as well. I'd recommend checking out a Breakthrough News, which is worker independent media, a Liberation School, Liberation News. that are projects of the PSL and focused on of showing the movement and showing of the struggle of the people, because fundamentally of when we can cut through these lies and show the reality for everyday working people, that's when if people can realize, actually, our struggles are connected, our struggles are united. And in fact, of the reason of why we are poor right here, of why poverty is growing, of why we don't have healthcare, why we don't have education, is because of the military bases that are being built in Poland. Because of the military bases all over the world, U.S. military bases, 1,000 of them that are occupying, that are funneling all of this money into war, into bombs, into invasions, and that pull all of these other societies too, with Polish society, Romanian, others that are pulling them into the U.S. imperialist sphere, and gearing up for war. And so it's a big struggle of stopping the Cold War, of cutting through the capitalist propaganda and bringing forward the socialist message and the fight for a socialist future. Because our present right now, we can't take it anymore. There's no time to lose. If we have to continue of building and organizing, and just as in the U.S. of last year, there were tens of millions of people in the street, we know that more challenges will come. People will rise up. People will see the need to fight, and why we need to fight for a socialist future.
Thank you one more time.